Thank you, and I'm just really excited to be back in Vermont. I think this is my third or fourth visit here, and I love coming to the state and seeing what's happening. And I've really enjoyed the exchange of ideas, the stimulating ideas and concepts that have been shared today. And I really hope I'm not too much of a downer, actually, because I'm going to talk about markets, competition, and how that relates to democracy. Actually, Gary talked about quite a few of those things. And I want you to know up front, I originally titled this Reality Checks on Food System Transformation. I decided that was way too much of a downer. But what I really want to talk about is I'm hopeful. I'm really excited about the food system transformation that's going on. I'm hopeful, as Cornel West says, hope is about the struggle, about being engaged, about doing the things that Tanya talked about, that people have talked about, right? However, I'm not so optimistic some days, and that's because I know quite a bit about the way the food system is organized in terms of markets and structures. I'm going to talk about that today. Now, I do a lot of work around good food in Missouri. I've spent 15 years working on local food systems. Spent 15 years on trying to get healthy food, green food, affordable food, fair food. The more criteria you add, the harder it becomes, right? Healthy and green sometimes go together. Healthy, green, and affordable, maybe. Healthy, green, affordable, and fair, difficult, right? And I'm going to talk about that today because I do think that those are very valuable criteria to think about in food system transformation. But there's an explosion of things going on in my own state up here. Still, 95% of the food we eat, give or take a little bit, comes through a very globalized, industrialized kind of system. Now I want to talk about how the system operates, and as Gary alluded to, who makes those decisions in the food system? Who makes the decisions about what food is produced, like corn on my brother's farm in Nebraska? He decides to plant it, right? Or why doesn't he plant more things that my students would like, right? That they're interested in seeing people in Nebraska and Missouri plant. Who makes those decisions? Who decides where something's going to be produced, where food is going to be produced? This happens to be a picture of Arizona chilies, but as Gary said, we in the Midwest eat a lot of water, right, from Arizona and parts south during the wintertime. Where is this food going to be produced? We don't even think of the water transportation, probably. Who gets to make decisions about how it's going to be produced? Now, I have a picture of everybody's favorite chicken production method, right? You have to think about this, though, as an incredibly sophisticated technological way to put together a lot of chickens and raise them without too many problems. But who decides how it's going to be produced? Most of us would probably rather have it out on pasture, yet most of my guys doing this in Missouri have high fatality rates with their chicken. Who decides how it's produced? Who decides who's going to produce it? These farm workers that I met out in Bakersfield, California, involved in the table grape industry. Farm workers who suffer from uncertain legal status often, not always, but often, and farm workers are among the least food secure group in our country. So who's going to produce our food? Is it going to be a lot of farm workers? Is it going to be energetic, young farmers? By the way, many of these folks that start out as farm workers end up being producers as well. Or are these energetic young producers who are flooding into farming, as has been alluded to earlier today, like these folks down in Springfield, Missouri, who are doing a lot to change what the food system looks like there. And the final question is, who gets to eat it? Who decides who gets to eat it? We have made a de facto decision here in the United States that who gets to eat. You have money, right? If you have money, you can purchase food. And as we start through this idea of creating new economic systems, we have to pay attention to this, especially as we think that globally, 40% of the world's population earns $2 a day or less. $2 a day or less. A for-profit food system that is sourcing the world for where things can be produced cheapest is not that interested in those consumers that earn $2 a day or less. They like to start with $8 a day or less, or more, $8 a day or more. These are the questions that, or the decisions that get made all the time in the food system. And my point here is, we are all implicated in those decisions, right? But we're implicated in them in a way we might not anticipate, because we're ensnared in this web of relationships on both the farmer and the consumer side. I have here a poultry, well, you can see the person, a poultry grower, a diagram of a poultry grower. Once a poultry grower, it could be Louisiana, it could be Missouri, it could be the Delmarva Peninsula. Once a poultry grower decides to enter a contract, decides that that's the only economic development opportunity in their particular area, and decides to enter a contract with an integrator, every other decision is made for them. Decisions about what to feed the chickens or the broilers, what kind of veterinary care, when the chickens are going to come to the farm, when they're going to leave the farm, all of those decisions are made by the integrating firm. And it actually puts the farmer in a very dependent kind of relationship with that integrating farm or integrating firm. And you might say, oh, that's a poultry farmer and I'm never going to do that. Yet all of us are enmeshed in those same sorts of webs of relationships and those webs of decisions as we think about the food system. So let me talk about some of those. Well, let me talk about what this means. These are not competitive markets, and I want to talk about competitive markets for a minute here, because I think we overlook how important competition and competition policy and competitive markets are in transforming the food system. What are competitive markets? This is a competitive market. This is a produce auction in Jamesport, Missouri. There's lots of buyers. There's lots of sellers. The price is established how? By yelling out how much you're going to give. There's free flow of information. No one buyer, no one seller influences that market there. Now compare that to the marketplace you might see tomorrow at the end of a long week when you want to go out and shop for your favorite beverage. I don't know, in Vermont, can you go to the grocery store and buy this stuff? We can, Missouri. And this is what you might be confronted with. As my colleagues from Michigan State say, it looks like there's a lot of choices until you start doing the work on the geography of beer, and you see that there's just a few brewers out there that really have significant market share. In fact, 2, with about 75% of the market share for beer in this country. And of course, Anheuser-Busch isn't even owned in St. Louis anymore. It's owned by InBev, and these are all of the different kinds of brands they have. And if you want some more, they're the Budweiser stable of brands. So it's the illusion of choice here, the illusion of decision. You know, a few years ago, Anheuser-Busch kept GM rice out of Missouri. Could they do that today? Because they get to make decisions about production. Farmers, on the other hand, when they're faced with consolidated markets, like the seed market here. The seed market, this is 2007 data, over 50% of the seeds that are global proprietary seed market are traded with 4 firms. Unless you think, oh, that poor brother out in Nebraska who's a corn and soybean farmer, think again, because Monsanto happens to be the largest vegetable firm in the world as well. And then when you go and look at those inputs that Dr. Vogelman was talking about, and you start to talk about fertilizer, then you deal with the fertilizer cartels, right? In Canada, in Russia, in the US. And then when you go to sell your product, right, you start to see your choices as a farmer. Now I put this up here because if you see, I have a thing called CR4. And CR means the concentration level of the top 4 firms, or the amount of markets or capacity the top 4 firms control. If it's over 40%, 4 or fewer firms have more than 40% of the marketplace, it acts like a monopoly, which means the decisions are made by the 1 or 2 or 3 actors who have the power to make those decisions in that marketplace. What do you notice with this? All of them are over 40%. You should notice something else. Same names, right? In most of those commodities, it's the same names. And if you're thanking your lucky stars that you have abandoned now the idea of farming that everybody's been talking about, look at the bottom line. That's where we, all of us, in some fashion or another, interact in the food system. Walmart didn't sell groceries until 1989, and now they have between a quarter and a third of the grocery market. Who decides what's in a Walmart store? Who decides how it's produced, where it's produced, what's being produced? Who decides? And what kind of food system do we end up with? It's a homogeneous food system, right? It's a very homogeneous food system that's not very healthy, as we heard today, not very green in the face of climate change. It's somewhat affordable for a lot of people, not everyone, and only if you don't add externalized cost, and it's not very fair. Again, it comes down to who makes decisions, and that's what I'm talking about with the democracy. My friend Fred, who makes a lot of decisions on his farm, my friend Jeremy, who does many of the same, but what kind of markets are they going to sell in? What kind of decisions are my students going to get to make? What about the farmers I'm working with in South Africa? What kind of decisions are they going to make about their food system? The workers, what kind of control over the workday and the food system do they have? What kind of control, when it really comes down to it, do we have as consumers? That's why, as Tanya said, food sovereignty, control over our own resources, our own food system, is very important. And right now, that control, those decisions, those are being made based on one criteria, generally, what makes money. And the decisions are being made by a very small group of people, not evil, nice people, I'm sure. I'm serious about that, right? Probably witty, probably interested in lots of different kinds of things. But the point is they're responsible to shareholders. And who are the shareholders? Myself, probably, because I have no control over the pension funds my university invests. They have to make decisions that are going to be based on these bottom lines. This is the reality. And this is what we have to understand if we're really going to think about food system change. Because that kind of system doesn't really get us to where we need to go, right? It doesn't get us into the ideas of how we need to create resilient systems and diverse systems and complex systems. And I guess my question is, how you change? And you're probably thinking, how do we change this? Oh my goodness. Well, I think that we have to go back 100 years and think about some of the strategies folks tried then. Then it was called bust the trusts. It was called antitrust. And there was an idea that competition in and of itself was actually a good idea for individuals like farmers, individual business folks, individual consumers, but also for communities. And we have to think about what can we do in the area of competition policy to create the conditions we need for competitive markets, for markets that will encourage those kinds of resilient communities, those diverse farms, those really healthy ecologies. We're creating food hubs. We're doing a lot of direct markets, but pretty soon we go right up against the structure. And we have got to pay attention to the policy part of our system in order to reset that structure in some way. Well, there's multiple ways to do that, but basically we have to pay attention to competition. Thank you.